This is Khatt Chronicles, design stories from the Arab world, presented to you in collaboration with Afikra.
My name is Yasmine Taan, and I have with me today Aude Abou Nasr, who is also known as Ahlan My Darlings. Aude is a French-Lebanese illustrator, animator, and visual artist based in Beirut. She works with independent media and initiatives such as Maikali, Kahel Journal, Architectural Review, Gaza Poets Society, Queering the Map, and most recently, her work appeared in the book that is right in front of me, Revealing, Recording, Reflecting, that was published recently, very recently by Khatt Books in Amsterdam. And the book is amazing. It's thick and it has all these amazing female illustrators, and Aude is part of them. And I'm looking at the illustrations. We're going to be talking about these in a minute. Her art is a reflection of her personal, but also collective histories, weaving introspective narratives that explore memory and shared experiences in relation to place and belonging, or the lack of belonging. She is currently working on a submission on war crimes committed in South Lebanon for the Biennale Architectura 2025. I spoke to Aude a while ago to convince her to join our podcast. She said to me that she usually shies away from speaking about her artwork. I said, this is only natural for an illustrator to do so. Illustrators illustrate because they use drawings instead of words to communicate. So I finally managed to convince her to join us. Hi, Aude.
Hi, Yasmine. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Aude, I was looking at all these very interesting people that you work with now that you're mentioning, the different initiatives. I'm looking at the pages that cover you in the book, Revealing, Recording, Reflecting. And here I see that you did work for Beirut Feminist March. I see that you did work for the Kafala, Justice for Domestic Workers. Amazing illustrations, really. I really would have wanted these illustrations to be covering all the whole page and not just, small and squares. But but there are some of them bleeding off the page where I can see here Women and Melancholy. Really interesting work, mostly for social, and I'm just thinking about the migrant workers. Tell us a bit about this before we start with the question. I don't know. Maybe how do you get how do you get all these people? How do you connect? How do you know how do you get your jobs? Lots of questions that we will be discussing.
Well, I'm going to try to give you a concise answer, but I think to me it happened kind of progressively in the sense that so initially illustration wasn't my medium at all. I studied architecture. I liked drawing, but I never thought it could be my work. I started working a bit in set design because that was kind of an escape from architecture and everything. And I think working in that field, especially in Paris, in environments where I realized that a lot of the things that I genuinely care about and was raised to care about weren't really things that I could work on there. And I felt this kind of frustration of what is the point of doing anything creative if we're not trying to address actual issues that we face on an everyday basis? So the fact that I started experimenting with illustration was also, I guess, a try on my side to find a way to make work with and about the communities that I wanted to talk about. But also on a more personal level, I think anybody who's grown up in diaspora can relate to the kind of caring about multiple places at once and questioning how to stay aligned with what's important to me. And so illustration was kind of this medium where I could be very close to people because there's masalan, especially on the domestic workers related initiatives, a lot of the stuff I had to do was, for example, very violent stories and very intimate stories. And no, there is a big proximity when you do illustration and you work with people on like their struggle, their fight. And at the same time, there is a certain like geographical freedom that was very much adapted to where I was at the time of questioning my own, like, okay, where should I like sit? Actually, working on projects around the kafala system was kind of the first projects I did, because I started sharing some personal illustrations more about Kamen and where I was mental health-wise at the time. I remember at the time I reached out to what were like the first collectives I could see of domestic workers, and I was like, can I like, okay, how can I be useful to you guys? And so I started doing some portraits of some of the girls, and that's how in a shui it got to the collaborations that were a bit more like Masan, the book I made with Enya Lenya, and it's it came quite progressively. And I think there's something that you were asking me, how do these projects, like how do I end up in these projects and how does it, Saraha, I feel it's been very natural the way things have evolved, because at the end of the day, and I'm very grateful for that, like I think because of the topics I started talking about and the ways in which these collaborations happened, I'm very grateful like for the amount of trust that a lot of like initiatives have given me to draw like the core of their stories and the core of their suffering. And it's just it just went from there.
Great. So let's go back to the past a bit. Where did you study?
So I studied architecture in Paris. I started in a first school that's like Paris Est, Marne-la-Vallée, where I studied like very like technical things, which wasn't working for me because I don't think I have that kind of brain. So that's called La Villette, where basically they had a set design department. And from there, I wasn't very, very serious with my classes, but it was a time where I was opening up to collaborating with people a lot and experimenting how I could use what I learned in architecture in more creative ways. So yeah, that's from my study.
And how has this informed your career? How has, like set design and maybe starting to study architecture informed in a way your career? I know that in architecture, they take some not illustration, but rendering courses, like drawing, but nothing that looks like what you are doing now. So maybe a bit about how this influenced your work, or maybe not.
It's actually something I'm thinking about more nowadays, because for a long time, I used to kind of put aside the fact that I studied architecture to my father's disbelief of like, you studied architecture. But so for me, when I entered architecture, I didn't have the background that a lot of the students had. Like I didn't know much about architecture. And I think like I had this interest in drawing a couple years before I had to choose my specialization. So I arrived to architecture. I could already draw a bit, which is more and more rare actually in architecture schools, because now I don't even know how it is now, but 10 years ago when I was there, like it was, okay, the first 2 years you're going to draw by hand and then it's full computer. So, and I got accepted in architecture school, and honestly, like the first day of architecture school, I went back and I remember crying and being like, why did I put myself in these studies? This is like, they put us in front of a page and we have to like make these geometrical things. And honestly, architecture was really rough for me because I'm kind of a scatterbrain. I'm more interested in actually people and their stories. And I realized what I like about architecture is what it says about the people. I mean, it's very like the way that it's built, like you're not very autonomous, like you're very dependent on budget. You're very dependent on a bunch of different actors, like who is doing the lighting, who is doing this, who is doing that. And I'm such a stubborn person that sometimes I just like to have this one-to-one thing where it's like, now the good thing with illustration is there is a lot of freedom that illustration gives is kind of, I think, what made me stick to it at the end of the day.
This is so interesting. I think I would like you to tell us more about how does it happen with your clients, if I may call them clients, like, is it that they give you the brief that is a text, and then what you do is you translate this text into images, or how, I think I'm simplifying the whole process. Maybe you can tell us more about this.
No, you're actually not simplifying it at all. It does depend. Like some project, we're going to be meeting more, some we're going to be meeting less. It can really change from one client to another. And a lot of especially most of the, like, let's say social activist projects I do, it's kind of another relationship because it's not necessarily like paid projects. And in that case, it's more organic than when it's like actual work where, you have to have this procedure, like, okay, we're going to do like this amount of feedbacks. We're going to do a preliminary brief, then I'm going to send you sketches, etc., etc. It kind of depends. Like sometimes people send me a text or send me content that already gives me a lot of what I need to know. And then it's more like, I think I have this kind of time that I need to dive into the text with my music, do my research, and basically grow my own feelings from the text. And then from there, I try to find a balance between representing, because I do like when things are quite precise, and maybe this comes from architecture. Like I do always try to stay very close to the text. Like I struggle to get extremely metaphorical because I like to be quite close to the text. But at the same time, you have to have your own personal things that make you smile or suffer or like feel this or that in a text to be able to really give the person like drawings that feel alive. So yeah, and I try to always do backs and forths, especially like, so the mistake I would make, I think, when I started working was like, I would be so insecure about my own work that I would want to very quickly show my client, like, look, I did something so professional. And now with time, I understood that, no, actually, it's sometimes more important to take more time in those early stages. And I allow myself to ask questions more and be like, oh, I had this idea. What do you think, before I start drawing? And I try to make it a bit more organic in the first phases of the project, because maybe also because I know my medium better now, like I can very easily estimate how I'm going to do things. Like all the technical parts are a bit more clear for me now. So I spend more time talking with the client I'm working with. Yeah.
What about the color palette? I'm looking at your illustrations in the book, Revealing, Recording, Reflecting, and most of your illustrations in this book are use, blue colors, tints of blue, violet, cold colors. I don't know. Is this something that, is this a preference, or does this have to do with the topic?
I've always had kind of an attraction for everything, like from blue to pink to purple. I think it's mainly because they're colors that are very soothing. And as a person, I'm quite extremely anxious. And I've always tried in my practice, even when I was doing like photography or set design, like I had this kind of instinctive thing of trying to create things that would soothe me. And also I think, like, especially like these past years, I've worked on a lot of very, very violent topics, right? And I think I am trying to find, I feel like oftentimes if we're trying to have a conversation about like issues that have caused like trauma to people, masalan, and we're on very like inflammatory topics, where I'm very like, if you're going to be talking about war or about sexual abuse or these kinds of things. And I think like spontaneously, when I, especially working on some topics, there is kind of I am kind of drawn to trying to use illustration as a way to work through these topics from a place of grieving the reality, but having still a certain type of gentleness or like softness in the colors and the tones and the like. I didn't want to fall into something that's extremely sad, but I do really, really, really hope that when people read, for example, a comic about like a completely different experience from theirs, like the place that they connect with is their heart, some sort of like compassion and like relating to the other person's pain. Yeah, just I guess this kind of visual softness is how I try to help these conversations happen at my tiny illustration scale, you know.
How do you deal with deadlines?
I'm actually quite like, I always try to make sure I finish things a bit in advance. When it comes to paid work and everything that is like freelancing, etc., like I'm not someone to be late, you know, for my deadlines, for example. But what's been more difficult for me, honestly, is when it comes to all the other projects, and especially like if you're masalan working between 2 or 3. Like the thing is, when you're going to be working on these topics are like the struggle of the person you're working with. They're like the sometimes even their reason to live like is to fight on this topic. And what I do struggle with sometimes is the pressure of maintaining my own livelihood as an illustrator in a like capitalist, like neoliberal economy, and wanting really, Amjad, if I could give all the time like that I had to these initiatives that are maybe not funded, but that have a real like positive goal. Like I would love to, but what I find challenging is managing to handle the time pressure of both paid work and everything I decide to do, because that's why I do illustration in the first place. So I manage deadlines, but sometimes I just really, I would say the huge majority of people that I do things for are extremely sweet and grateful. But I do feel that to a certain extent, like especially when someone's work starts being a bit visible, I feel that sometimes I do struggle to get like people to understand that, and I'm doing my best, but I have to make a living. I have to, like, there's a lot of things. And I think sometimes people can have this impression that like, oh, wow, you have some following and things are rolling for you. So like, if this person is putting a certain limit, it's coming from a place of like, I don't want to do this, when at the end of the day, and no, I, as many illustrators, we're very committed to what we're doing. And I think every one of us, most of us, are really trying our best. And sometimes it's just very challenging to negotiate the pressure and the topics that you're working on with the constraints of this of economy, basically, of like, well, the most urgent things are not necessarily the most funded, and as much as I would like to prioritize them, I do have to make everything work together.
Yeah, no, but clearly your work is, you're very passionate about your work. Clearly your work is not commercial, commercial between coats. It is more driven by your fashion and your, emotions and yourself. So tell us, what is the project you are most proud of?
Okay, so most recently, so now it's not yet visible, but let's say a recent project I've been working on and I'm very happy with is, you mentioned it because it's in my bio, because I'm trying to keep my bio up to date, that I've been invited by Collective for Architecture, who are a great collective here, to participate in the Venice Biennale. And I was illustrating a text by Sarah Sinno, an activist that I really love. She has a page called Earth Preservation Project. So she was speaking about basically all of the toll damage that's been inflicted on South Lebanon during the war. And I worked on this, and this is an approach that I've been working on increasingly, is like trying to use mapping as a way, like mapping and illustration mixed in a way to basically create something that tells us very...
Information graphics, kind of.
Exactly. So in this case, it was like, how do we show how the land that like inhabits all of this incredible wildlife and this incredible fauna that is very very fragile in certain areas, how do we show how Israeli colonial violence has been repeatedly destroying this? And same for example, the architectural history that there is in Junub, and this type of project where like we manage to actually map our present and show the layers between the spaces we inhabit, the violence we experience as communities. How do we show all of these layers and how rooted they are in land and location? And it's funny because I'm like, it's like it's like a circle that is closing these days, because I'm seeing what I learned in architecture being useful in another way in these works I've been doing. And Masalan, just before, I had just finished working on a project for an artist called Ahmed Al-Barzawi, who's a Syrian artist, and he wanted to tell the story of his migration from Sham to France, and how basically his family is scattered all across the Middle East, and he has this kind of triple life between his past, his family that he hasn't seen in 10 plus years, apart from through the phone, and at the same time, this very, very like that I think a lot of Syrians have experience of, like going from one country to another and having these many steps before they reach a place where they can actually stay. It's also about like how space and place and location and memories and all of these things like layer up and create like the human experience, basically. At the end of the day, a lot of these questions have so many layers to them and so many like that it's so hard to represent them in a very like quick and efficient way, that I think finding more and more peace and accepting that some stories or some things just require to spend a lot of hours zooming in and enjoying all of these tiny elements, that when you zoom out, these things exist together, like as us as individuals. Somehow we are a part of where we grew up, we are a part of who raised us, we have as a part of us like everybody we've met, everything that's hurt us, it becomes a part of us. And how do we as humans exist in those multitudes of layers? And I think that's how we can also think land in the way that I tried to do it with the illustration for the Biennale, or with someone's story as I tried to do with the Ahmed.
Okay, great. I also want here, I'm thinking about this question. Where do you think illustration is going in, like, I don't know, 10 to 20 years? What's going to happen to this field, this profession of being an illustrator?
Honestly, I don't know. Like, I feel like some days I wake up and I'm like, okay, we have 5 years left and AI is going to take over. And then the next day I'm going to be like, there are still people pressing vinyls and doing analog photography, so we should be fine. The issue I see on an everyday basis that is very like simple and shows me how it's going to be a struggle is like, for example, illustration is a medium where there's just that much that you can compress how much time it takes to draw. And the problem is like increasingly like people, because they see the development of AI, everything is going faster. All of us live in this world where like, oh my God, my delivery hasn't arrived. It's been 30 minutes. What the hell? You know, like just expect things to be so fast. And I'm just worried about, before even AI and everything, let's put AI aside, but hatta on the way that us as humans were able to be patient. Like sometimes I'm worried because I realize that we're not given enough time to do the work. And for me, like that would actually really threaten the sustainability of my practice if I reached a point where I'm not given the possibility to make something that I'm going to be happy with, because I genuinely believe that sometimes it's just better to not do things than to do them badly, or to do them without putting enough attention and love into them. So honestly, I am kind of worried on how illustrators would be able to make a living. At the same time, I think for me, what's really, really, really helped me is trying to have a kind of diversity in my sources of revenue or in the clients I have or the things I do, because Kamen, one of the main things for our generations is that we see certain tools come up and be like on a pedestal, and then 5 years later they can be like we laugh about them. You know what I mean? So I feel like for our generations, it's very important to not like put all of our
interest in one box or
exactly.
all the effort in one
not
box.
on only one. And I think it's also really a kind of balance like that. You have to. It's really, really hard, but I think like being able to stay consistent with the balance between paid work and maybe the more like, whether it's like unpaid projects about a cause that matters to you, or if it's مثلا this creative exploration you're going through, I feel it's very important to be able to protect that from the work capitalist making a living kind of aspect. And that's something I'm negotiating with all the time. And I think it's going to be more and more challenging for young illustrators to find the space and find even just, it's a muscle. Like I feel sometimes like I'm going like I have to be so insanely fast in some of the things that I do that it's taking me more time to pace down. And I'm thinking, I see our generations overworking like crazy, and I'm just like, on the long run, it will also be about how do we manage to save a bit of space in that to continue evolving and questioning our practices and everything in a consistent way. مثلا هلا I've just tried the painting on ceramics for the first time in my life. It's a lot of fun. It's something like 3 years ago, I would have been like, why would I take 3 days to test painting on ceramics? There's much more important things to do. And now after 5 years of working on a certain pace, like I'm realizing like, no, I actually do have to sometimes keep some times for some activities that are maybe not going to be constructive right now, or maybe I'm going to fuck it up because I don't know what I'm doing, but at least I'm stepping out of my comfort zone and I'm basically not letting myself become a robot. Because for me, like if I'm constantly running after the capitalist, like that reality of my work that is like trying to manage time and money and projects and everything, eventually I might just become ChatGPT myself and be like, see the email and be like, keywords, like, and then just like automatically like do something. And
I really like this part where you explore different media. I think you should definitely not stop doing this. I think even if, as you said, you don't use the work, explore, like this, like I'd like to see those illustrations drawn on ceramics or whatever. I know it takes an extra effort to do that, and you need to have the material, so more spendings, but I think it's worthwhile, exploring. Great. So any final word that you would like to share with us? Any thoughts that you would like to leave us with?
I would say, I don't know, I would say like just good luck to all the other illustrators, and overall like something that I've learned is that like for most years of my life, I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams that like it's possible to live of illustration or of our mediums. And I think like the one thing I would say is, and it is really, really rough to do the jobs we do, but I think with collaborating with each other, with talking with each other, with supporting each other, and with, instead of, it can be tempting sometimes to gatekeep our art. And I think like to keep going, we do need to find a form of togetherness in our practices. And okay, we have the constraints of social media, but it also helps us connect and have these artistic communities that are built outside of elitist common frameworks. So I would just, for young artists and everything, like stay hopeful, stay connected with other artists, collaborate. Like a lot of us are going through this, and there's always solutions to be found, even if you take a break in your practice because you have to work a full-time day job. It trusts that you can get back to it. And just, I guess, that's all I really want to leave.
It's making me think about a last question here. So you really seem very involved in what you do. And so your work is somehow a reflection of your thoughts, your personal thoughts. And so here I'm thinking, what if one day you're approached by a client who's giving you an assignment that is not aligned with your way of thinking? Would you take it?
Of course. I refuse projects all the time. Some people are wild. Honestly, I've already received some proposals for projects where I was like, are you insane? But like
we love you, Aude.
No, but seriously, Amjad, we see insane stuff sometimes. But of course, I think it's, I know how much of
an illustrator with integrity.
We try. It's just like I made this choice for myself, but I respect everybody's choice. I think we all have like constraints and we're doing our best. But at least for me, I've realized that it's much easier for me to live with myself, trying to maintain my ethics and my vision in my illustration work. And if I need to financially do another job, I'll do it. But like I realized that for me, it's more important to keep my medium loyal to my ethics or how I see things. And I think sometimes we're afraid of refusing projects because we're raised in an idea of scarcity that like, if I refuse it, I'm not going to get what. No, we can refuse things. Like we don't have to. Okay, we live in challenge, and I say this, someone has to accept. We all have to compromise to a certain extent. Sometimes, like there is no 100% ethical way of making a living in our societies, but it does help on the long run. And honestly, I think even in regards to the people who work with us, it's important for them to feel that like we are genuinely trying to, if we're going to work our asses off in this life, that we want to try and work our ass off towards the positive in this and improving things in our communities or the communities that live in around us. And sorry, I hope I answered your questions. I'm a bit scattered.
Yes, no, this is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, Aude, for all what you've shared with us today and, this inspiring conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. This was Khatt Chronicles, Design Stories from the Arab World.